Chicago in February 2022 was freezing. Snow lay thick and gray on the side of the street, and the wind was bone-chilling. In a small house on the north side of town, Linda stood by the living room window, her forehead pressed against the cold glass. Her dark hair fell to her shoulders, and her green eyes were tired. Behind her, on the couch, Jim sat with his nose in a tablet. His blonde hair was slightly disheveled, and his face was illuminated by the blue light of the screen. Their 6-year-old son, Michael, was with a family friend, Emily, who sometimes took him for the weekend. The living room, with its beige walls and old wooden table, seemed too quiet, almost oppressive. Linda turned, hugging herself, and looked at her husband. "Jim," she said softly, her voice soft but slightly trembling. He didn't look up, his fingers still scrolling through the news. "Huh? What's that?" he muttered, still looking. She swallowed, stepped closer to the couch, trying to catch his eye. "I was thinking maybe we could go out today, just the two of us. It's been a while since we've been out." Jim finally set the tablet down on the armrest and rubbed the bridge of his nose. His blue-gray eyes looked tired. "Today, Lynn, I barely made it home from work. Maybe another time." She sat down on the edge of the sofa opposite him, fiddling with the sleeve of her gray sweater. "Okay, but what about the weekend? Sunday, for example?" Her voice became a little more insistent. Jim sighed, leaning back on the couch. "We'll see, okay? I've got a business trip next week, and I'm busy." Linda frowned, her fingers still. "A business trip? You didn't say. Where?" "San Francisco," he shrugged, as if it didn't matter. "From the 13th to the 16th. A work conference." "The 13th?" She paused, calculating in her head. "That's before Valentine's Day." Jim nodded, picking up the tablet again. "Yeah, well, I'll be back by the end of the week, all good." Linda looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. She had been imagining how she and Jim would spend this holiday for a month. A cozy dinner, candles, maybe even dancing to an old record like they used to. Now it was all falling apart. She tried to smile, but it was forced. "How about we celebrate when you get back? Do something special." He glanced at her, then back at the screen. "Yeah, you can. Work right now." "I know," she interrupted quietly, almost in a whisper. "Work." Silence hung between them. Jim was again poring over the news, and Linda was looking at his profile, familiar to every line. A few years ago, he had been different, smiling at her, joking, hugging her for no reason. Now it was as if a wall had grown between them. She remembered how Emily had picked up Michael last week and said with a slight smile, "Poor Jim, he's completely exhausted. Give him a rest, Linda." She had kept silent then, but the words had hurt. Emily had always been there, a friend of Jim's since the time of his first wife, Anna. She helped with Michael, but Linda sometimes felt that her concern was too intrusive. "Jim," she began again, making up her mind, "are you staying in San Francisco long?" He put the tablet down, clearly annoyed. "3 days, maybe until the 16th if the meetings drag on. I told you." "It's just," she hesitated, choosing her words, "you've been so busy lately. I'm worried that we barely talk." Jim frowned and crossed his arms. "Lynn, I'm in a rush at work. You know how many projects are pending. I'm trying for us, for Michael." "I know," she nodded, trying not to show her offense. "But sometimes it feels like you're not here at all, even when you're at home." He rolled his eyes, throwing his head back. "Oh my God, Linda, let's not start. I'm tired, really. No time for talking now." She bit her lip, feeling the heaviness growing in her chest. She wanted to shout that she was having a hard time too, that she missed him, but the words stuck. Instead, she stood up. "Okay, I'll go make dinner." "Yeah, I'll be there soon," he muttered, already looking at the screen again. In the kitchen, Linda turned on the light and began taking vegetables out of the refrigerator. She chopped carrots, trying to concentrate on the movement of the knife, but her thoughts were focused on Jim. His detachment, his short answers, The way he avoided her gaze, it was all frightening. Michael had noticed, too. He had recently asked why Mom and Dad didn't play together like they used to. Linda had laughed it off, but inside she felt a pang. She dropped the chopped vegetables into a bowl and dried her hands on a towel. Emily, her name popped into her head again. Linda couldn't help but think that this woman was in their lives too often. Helping with Michael, sure, but was her help always so necessary? Yesterday, for example, she had volunteered to pick up the boy from school, although Linda could have done it. And Jim didn't seem to see anything strange in that. "Lynn, what's that smell?" Jim's voice came from the doorway. He walked in holding a bottle of water, looking a little less tense. "Stew," she replied without turning around. "It'll be ready in half an hour." "Cool." He opened the fridge and took out another bottle. "Is Michael at Emily's until tomorrow?" "Yes, she took him for the night." Linda turned, looking at her husband. "Jim, can I ask you a question?" He froze with the bottle in his hand. "What?" "Emily. Does she talk to you often?" "Well, about us, about Michael." Jim frowned and closed the refrigerator door. "What do you mean? Of course she does. She's helping. What are you picking on her for?" "I'm not picking on you." Linda tried to speak calmly. "It's just, sometimes it seems like she knows more about our lives than I do. You share things with her, but not with me." "Oh my God, Linda." He rolled his eyes. "Emily's a family friend. She was with us when, after Anna. She's known Michael since he was a baby. What's wrong with her helping out?" "It's nothing." Linda turned back to the stove, stirring the stew. "Forget it." Jim stood there for a second, then stepped closer. "If something's bothering you, just say it. No need for hints." She turned around, meeting his gaze. "Okay, straight. It seems to me that you are closer to her than to me. You talk to her, joke, and with me only about work or that you are tired." Jim opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly holding back. "That's not true, Lynn. You're overreacting. Emily's just a friend. She has a boyfriend, by the way." "She never mentioned him," Linda countered, crossing her arms. "Because you hardly talk to her," he snapped. "I saw her boyfriend. He's a normal guy. Let's not make a big deal out of nothing, okay?" Linda nodded, feeling her insides tighten. "Okay, let's not." He exhaled as if releasing tension. "That's good. I'm going to shower, then we'll eat." When he left, Linda leaned against the counter, closing her eyes. She wanted to believe that she was really overreacting, that Emily was just a friend and Jim was just tired. But her heart ached. She remembered how she and Jim used to laugh at stupid TV shows, how he would hold her on this very couch, how they would make plans for the future. Now it all seemed distant, almost alien. They barely spoke at dinner. Jim ate quickly, as if he were in a hurry to finish. "The stew is good," he said, pushing his plate away. "Thank you." "I'm glad you liked it," Linda replied, picking at her portion. He looked at her as if he wanted to say something, but changed his mind. "Listen, I have a meeting tomorrow morning, so I'll leave early. Will you pick up Michael from Emily's?" "Yes, of course," she nodded, although inside she felt another pang. Emily again. "Great," he stood up, putting his plate in the sink. "I'll go lie down, my head is splitting." "Good night," Linda said quietly, looking at his back. He nodded without turning around and disappeared down the hall. Linda remained at the table, looking at the cold dinner. She felt out of place in her own home. Jim, Michael, Emily, they all seemed to live in their own world, where she was not allowed. She stood up, cleared away the dishes, and went out onto the back porch. The frosty air stung her cheeks, and clouds of steam escaped from her mouth. Linda wrapped herself in a thin cardigan, looking up at the dark sky. The stars barely made it through the city lights. She wanted to cry, but the tears did not come. Instead, she thought, "What am I doing wrong? Why has he changed so much?" She remembered Jim talking about his first wife, Anna, who had died of cancer when Michael was a year old. He had spoken briefly and painfully of it then, but Linda sensed that the loss was still with him. Was it because he was comparing her to Anna? Or was it because Emily had known Anna and had always been there? Linda shook her head, pushing the thought away. She didn't want to suspect her husband of anything terrible. He was just tired, wasn't he? Returning to the house, she quietly went up to the bedroom. Jim was already asleep, his back to the wall. Linda lay down next to him, trying not to wake him. His even breathing could be heard in the darkness. She wanted to move closer, to touch him, his shoulder, but she didn't dare. There was an invisible barrier between them, cold as the February wind outside the window. Linda lay staring at the ceiling. The clock on her nightstand ticked away the seconds. She knew she had to do something to bring their closeness back. Maybe after his business trip, they could have a real talk. The summer of 2017 in Chicago was warm and sunny. On a narrow street in the center of town, among the brick buildings, there was a small book cafe called Pages and Brew. The inside smelled of freshly brewed coffee and old books. Volumes lined the shelves along the walls, and wooden tables by the windows invited customers to linger. Linda, a 24-year-old with dark hair tied in a loose bun, was arranging books on a shelf near the entrance. Her light dress swayed slightly in the light breeze, and a thoughtful smile played across her face. She was in her second month of working there, juggling her love of literature with the need to pay rent. The doorbell rang, and Linda looked up. A tall man walked into the cafe, carrying a child. He looked to be in his early 30s, his fair hair slightly disheveled, and his gray-blue eyes showing weariness. He carefully lowered the boy, who looked to be about 2.5 years old, onto the floor. The little boy, with curly fair hair, immediately ran to the shelves, exclaiming, "Books!" "Michael, don't touch anything, okay?" the man said softly, but with a note of concern. His voice was deep, with a slight rasp, and for some reason it made something inside Linda flutter. She smiled, straightening a stack of books. "Hello," she said as the man approached the counter. "How can I help you?" He looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment he seemed confused, but then he smiled quickly, a little sheepishly. "Hello. We just came to look. My son likes books." He nodded toward the boy, who was leafing through a large illustrated fairy tale on the bottom shelf with a serious expression. Linda looked at the little boy. His concentrated face touched her. "What a fine fellow," she said, leaning a little closer to the counter. "That's a great choice. Fairy tales always go down a treat." The man's smile widened, the corners of his eyes crinkling slightly. "Michael seems to agree with you. He loves being read to." "Do you read to him often?" Linda asked, feeling that the conversation was going well. "I try," he shrugged. "True, sometimes I fall asleep in the middle. Work, you know." Linda laughed, adjusting her glasses, which had slipped down to the tip of her nose. "I understand. I sometimes fall asleep with a book on my face." She nodded at the boy. "Is he looking for something specific, or does he just like bright colors?" "Everything is bright," the man chuckled. "But I'd like to find something new. We already have a whole library at home, and he demands more." He paused, as if thinking, then added, "Listen, have we met before? Have you been working here for a long time?" Linda shook her head, feeling a slight warmth on her cheeks from his attentive gaze. "No, just a couple of months. I'm Linda, by the way. Nice to meet you." He extended his hand, and she shook it. His palm was warm and slightly rough. "Jim," he said. "Everyone calls me Jim." "Likewise." "Nice to meet you, Jim," she smiled, holding her hand a second longer than necessary. "So you and Michael are book lovers?" "Well, we try," he nodded, looking at his son with tenderness. "I want him to grow up with books. He likes that, doesn't he, buddy?" Michael, hearing his name, turned and nodded gravely, clutching the story to his chest. Linda couldn't help but smile. "I think I might have something to offer," she said, coming out from behind the counter. "We've recently had some great children's picture books come in. Here, look." She walked over to the shelf and deftly pulled out a colorful volume with a dragon on the cover. Jim picked up the book and flipped through a couple of pages. Michael immediately ran up to him, peering over his hand. "Cool," Jim said, throwing a grateful glance at Linda. "Looks like this is it. Let's take it." "Great." Linda headed to the cash register, feeling a little nervous. "I'll ring it up now." While she scanned the book, Jim leaned against the counter. "Have you read this story?" he asked, pointing to the cover. Linda looked up and smiled. "Well, definitely when I was a kid. About a dragon who befriends a knight, right? Classic." "Good thing you knew," he chuckled. "I hope Michael likes it too." She finished the paperwork and handed him the bag. Suddenly, on impulse, she added, "If you want more recommendations or just coffee, come by. I'm here almost every day." Jim raised his eyebrows, then smiled, as if her words surprised him, but in a good way. "Thanks, Linda. Maybe we will." He took the bag and turned to his son. "Say thanks, Michael." "Thank you, Aunt Linda," the boy squeaked, looking at her with big eyes. Linda felt her smile widen. "Please, Michael, come again." The doorbell jingled as they left. Linda stood behind the counter, watching them through the window. Jim scooped Michael up in his arms, and they disappeared around the corner. She found herself smiling. This guy with a kid walking into her day left her with a strange feeling, like something important had just begun. A week passed, and Jim and Michael showed up at the cafe again. Linda, wiping down the counter, noticed them at the entrance and waved. "Hello, book lovers," she said, smiling. "Hi, Linda," Jim smiled back, lowering Michael to the floor. "We're here for more fairy tales." Michael immediately ran to the familiar shelf, and Linda came closer. "How do you like the dragon? Are you going?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Oh, yeah," Jim chuckled. "We read it 4 nights in a row. Now he's asking for more." "Cool," Linda laughed. "We have a second part. Or I can suggest something about pirates." "Writing?" Jim narrowed his eyes. "Let's talk about pirates. Michael likes ships." She nodded and led him to the shelf. While they were choosing a book, Linda glanced at Jim. There was no ring on his left hand, and she couldn't help but think that he must be alone. A widower, most likely too young to be divorced with such a small child. The thought made her sympathize. It must be hard to raise a child alone. This one, she handed him a book with a bright cover. About a pirate and his parrot. Michael should like it. "This looks cool," Jim flipped through the pages. "You're a real expert on children's books." "Well, I'm sorting through the shelves here," she shrugged, smiling. "Plus, I like fairy tales myself. They remind me of my childhood." "That's cool." He looked at her a little longer than necessary, and Linda felt her cheeks warm. "How long have you been in Chicago?" "All my life," she replied, returning to the counter. "I grew up in the suburbs, then moved here. What about you?" "Also local," he nodded, following her. "I work as an engineer, mostly freelance, so I can spend more time with Michael." "That's great," Linda punched the book. "Not every dad is that concerned." Jim shrugged, but his smile softened. "I will try. It's the only one I have, you know." Linda nodded, holding out the bag. "If anything, I'm here. Books, coffee, everything in stock." "I'll remember," he smiled, taking Michael's hand. "See you later, Linda." "Bye, Jim," she waved after them. Over the next few weeks, Jim and Michael came regularly. Sometimes on weekends, sometimes on weekday afternoons. Linda knew their orders by now: black coffee for Jim, juice for Michael, and always a new book. The conversations grew longer, easier. Jim talked about his work, about Michael learning to speak in complete sentences. Linda shared stories about her life, how she had dreamed of becoming a literature teacher, but the tuition had been too expensive, how she had been left alone when her parents died in her youth. One day, while Michael was drawing with pencils at the table, Jim lingered at the counter. "Listen, Linda," he began, fiddling with the handle of his bag. "This might sound weird, but do you want to go somewhere sometime, like the planetarium? I'll leave Michael with the nanny." Linda froze, feeling her heart beat faster. She hadn't expected this, but his gaze open, slightly nervous, made her smile. "A planetarium?" she asked, buying time. "Sounds cool. Yeah, I'm in." "Really?" His face lit up. "Cool. Then, Saturday, tonight?" "Agreed," she nodded, feeling warmth in her chest. "Great," Jim smiled wider. "I'll text you. Can you give me the number?" Linda wrote her number on the check and handed it to him, trying not to show how fingers are shaking. "Here, don't lose it." "I won't lose you," he winked, taking Michael. "See you on Saturday, Linda." As the door closed behind them, Linda pressed her palms to her cheeks, feeling them burn. She didn't know where this meeting would lead, but she could already sense that Jim and Michael weren't just random visitors. They were becoming part of her world. 2017-2018. Linda sat at a table in a small corner cafe, fiddling with the edge of her napkin. Across from her, Jim was trying to coax Michael into eating at least half of his sandwich. The boy, barely 6, shook his head stubbornly, smearing ketchup across his cheek. "Michael, come on, just one bite." Jim moved the plate closer. "It's your favorite, the chicken one." "I don't want it," Michael muttered, crossing his arms. "I want pizza." Linda smiled at them. This was their third date, if you could call going out with a child that. Jim had insisted that Michael come along because we're a team, you know. She didn't mind. She liked the way Jim took care of their son, even if it meant their conversations were often interrupted by arguments about food or toys. "Maybe we should order pizza," Linda suggested, winking at Michael. "Only if you finish at least one piece of your sandwich." Michael looked at her suspiciously, but then nodded. "Okay, but only a small piece." Jim laughed, leaning back in his chair. "You already negotiate with him better than I do. Where did you learn that?" "I have a younger brother," Linda replied, shrugging. "I had to be more cunning to get him to listen." They had met 3 months earlier at a parent-teacher conference at the school where Linda taught elementary grades. Jim had come to discuss Michael's progress, and Linda had noticed immediately how nervous he was, fiddling with his pen as he apologized for being late. He was a widower, raising his son alone, and that made him both vulnerable and strong. Linda liked that. After the cafe, they went to the park. Michael was running around the playground, and Jim and Linda were sitting on a bench, holding takeaway coffees. "Is he like this all the time?" Linda asked, nodding toward Michael, who was trying to climb to the top of the slide. "Yeah," Jim smiled. "Sometimes I can't keep up with him. But he's a good guy. He just misses his mom." Linda nodded, unsure of what to say. Jim rarely spoke of Anna, his late wife, but her presence was still there. The pictures in their house, the toys she bought Michael, even his habit of calling yogurt yogurty, it was all hers. "You're doing well," Linda finally said. "He's a happy child." Jim looked at her, gratitude flashing in his eyes. "Thank you. Sometimes I'm not sure about that." By the fall of 2017, their dates had become regular. Linda would often pick Michael up from school if Jim was working late. They would do homework together, bake muffins, though Michael ended up smearing the batter on the counter more than helping. Linda didn't mind. She enjoyed being a part of their lives. One evening, while the three of them were watching a cartoon, Michael suddenly turned to her. "Linda, will you stay with us forever?" She froze, not knowing how to answer. Jim, sitting next to her, also tensed up. "Well, I'd like to," she said cautiously. "What do you think?" Michael shrugged, but then moved closer and laid his head on her shoulder. "That would be cool." Jim smiled, but Linda noticed how he looked away. Later, when Michael was already asleep, she decided to ask, "Jim, are you okay? I mean, with us, with Michael being so attached to me." He sighed, rubbing the back of his head. "Yeah, it's okay. It's just, Anna's still here, you know? Not literally, but in his head. In mine. Sometimes I feel guilty for moving on." Linda took his hand. "I don't want to replace her. I just want to be with you and Michael." He looked at her and his face softened. "I know, and I'm glad you're with us. In the spring of 2018, Jim invited Linda to take a walk along the shore of Lake Michigan. Michael was staying with his grandmother, and it was a rare evening when they were alone together. As they walked along the water, Jim suddenly stopped. "Linda," he began, looking away, "I've been thinking for a long time about how to say this. You've made Michael and me happier than I could have ever imagined. I don't want this to ever end." She felt her heart pounding. Jim reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "Marry me," he said simply, opening the ring box. "Please." Linda laughed, although her eyes were already wet. "Are you serious?" "Of course, yes." He put the ring on her finger, and they hugged, standing by the water. The wind from the lake was cold, but Linda didn't care. "Does Michael know?" she asked when they finally pulled away. "Yeah," Jim grinned. "He said you had to say yes, or he'd get offended." The wedding was a small affair. In June 2018, they gathered in a small garden behind Linda's parents' house. About 20 people came, close friends and relatives. Michael wore a suit that he clearly didn't like because he kept tugging at his tie. Linda wore a simple white dress, and Jim wore his best jacket. As they exchanged vows, Linda noticed that Jim was shaking slightly. "I promise to love you," he said, looking into her eyes, "and to take care of you, and to tolerate your habit of leaving mugs everywhere." The guests laughed, and Linda playfully poked him in the side. "And I promise to love you," she replied, "and Michael, and to remind you where you left your keys." After the ceremony, Michael ran up to them, holding a flower he had picked from a flower bed. "This is for you," he said to Linda, handing her a crushed chamomile. "Thank you," she said, squatting down to hug him. "You're doing great today." He suddenly looked at her seriously. "Are you my mother now?" Linda froze. She felt Jim squeeze her hand. They hadn't discussed what Michael would call her, but this moment was more important than any conversation. "If you want," she said quietly, "I would like that very much." Michael nodded, then hugged her so tightly that she almost fell over. "Then okay, Mom." Linda felt the tears welling up again, but she simply hugged him back. Jim looked at them, his eyes shining too. Their first year of marriage was full of simple joys. They moved into a new house, small but with a garden where Michael could play. Linda continued to work at the school, and Jim got a promotion at work. In the evenings, the three of them often sat on the sofa, watching movies or playing board games. Michael loved Monopoly, although he always cheated. But Anna's shadow was still there. Sometimes Michael asked about her, especially before going to bed. "Mama Anna loved the stars," he said one day, looking out the window. "She said they were like lanterns." Linda nodded, trying not to show how much it hurt her. "It's beautiful," she replied. "Want to go to the planetarium this weekend? We'll look at the stars up close." Michael beamed. "Yeah, and Dad will go." "Of course," Linda smiled. "We're a team." She learned to accept that Anna would always be a part of their lives. It didn't mean Jim or Michael loved her any less. It was just the truth she lived with. One winter day in 2018, while they were decorating the tree, Jim suddenly turned to Linda. "You know, I never thought I'd be this happy again," he said, holding the garland in his hands. You changed everything." Linda smiled, adjusting the star on top. "You too, and Michael." He came up and hugged her from behind. "I love you." "I love you too," she replied, turning to face him. Michael, who was rummaging through his toy box, suddenly rolled his eyes. "Ugh, you're hugging again." They laughed, and Jim picked up Michael, spinning him around the room. "Get used to it, boy," he said. "This is forever now." Linda looked at them, and her heart was full. She knew that life would not always be so easy, but now, in this moment, everything was perfect. 2020-2021. Linda sat at the kitchen table, grading her students' notebooks. It was after midnight, but she couldn't stop. Work was distracting her from her thoughts. Jim had promised to be back for dinner, but he'd called at 6 to say he'd be late at work. Michael was asleep upstairs, and the house was too quiet. She glanced at her phone. No messages, no calls. Only the cold plate of lasagna she'd been making for the three of them sat on the table. Things had been going wrong for the past few months. At first, the 2020 lockdown had them trapped at home, and at first it had felt like an adventure. She, Jim, and Michael played board games, watched movies, even tried cooking together. But by summer, the routine had become stifling. Jim was working from home, locked in his office for hours at a time, and Linda was juggling online classes with caring for Michael. By fall, she was exhausted. The door creaked and Jim walked in, throwing off his coat. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "Are you still awake?" he asked, glancing at the notebooks. "No," Linda closed another notebook. "I thought maybe we could have dinner together, but you didn't write." "Sorry," he rubbed his temples. "I've been swamped at work. New project, deadlines. Didn't have time to warn you." "You could have at least told me," she said, trying to sound calm. "I was waiting." Jim sighed and sat down opposite. "Linda, I'm really trying. It's just, everything's been piling up." She nodded, but something inside her tensed. This wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation. Jim was disappearing at work more and more often, and when he came back, he was either too tired or irritable. She tried not to take it personally, but it didn't work. "Maybe we can go somewhere tomorrow," she suggested. "The three of us. Michael is bored." "Not tomorrow," Jim shook his head. "Emily promised to take Michael to her place. She'll have nephews, they'll play." Linda tensed. Emily. Emily again. "She takes it a lot," Linda said, trying not to sound accusatory. "Maybe we can handle it ourselves." "She helps," Jim shrugged. "And Michael has fun with her. What's wrong with that?" Linda didn't answer. She didn't want to start an argument, but Emily's name had been coming up too often in recent months. Emily was Anna's friend, and after her death, she became almost a member of the family. She visited regularly, brought Michael gifts, and helped Jim with chores. Linda was grateful at first Emily had known Michael since birth, and her presence calmed the boy. But over time, Linda began to notice that Emily was not just helping. She was interfering. One day in early 2020, Emily walked in on them while Linda was cooking dinner. Michael was drawing at the table and Jim was at work. "Oh, spaghetti." Emily peered into the pot. "Michael doesn't like it very much. Anna always made him lasagna with cheese." Linda gritted her teeth, but smiled. "He ate spaghetti last week. Everything was fine." "Well, maybe he just didn't want to upset you." Emily shrugged and turned to Michael. "Right, kid. Mom's lasagna was better, right?" Michael nodded, not looking up from his drawing. Linda felt the blood rush to her face. She wasn't his mother, Anna was. But Emily didn't just remind him of that. She did it as if Linda had no right to be there. Since then, such moments have been repeated. Emily criticized the way Linda dressed Michael. Anna always bought him warm jackets, the way she organized his day. Anna took him swimming. It was so important, even the way she decorated the house. Anna loved minimalism, and you have too many flowers here. Linda tolerated it, but every comment was like a jab. By the spring of 2021, the tension was mounting. Jim was spending more and more time with Emily, whether she was helping him with paperwork for work or picking up Michael from school together. Linda noticed Emily lingering at their house, laughing at Jim's jokes, touching his shoulder when she spoke. It was a small thing, but Linda couldn't stop thinking about it. One evening, when Michael was already asleep, Linda decided to speak. Jim was watching TV, flipping through the channels. "Jim, we need to talk," she said, sitting down next to him. "What happened?" He turned off the sound, but didn't turn around. "It's about Emily," Linda began, trying to speak calmly. She interferes too much. In our lives. Michael. In us." Jim frowned. "What do you mean? She's just helping." "She doesn't just help." Linda clasped her hands. "She constantly compares me to Anna. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. And you don't notice." "Linda, it's not fair." Jim turned to her. "Emily has been with us from the beginning. She lost Anna, just like I did. She cares about Michael." I care about Michael too, Linda's voice wavered. But every time she comes over, I feel like I'm the odd one out. And you protect her. Because she's not doing anything wrong. Jim raised his voice, but then fell silent, looking back at the stairs where Michael was sleeping. Look, I know it's hard for you, but Emily is a part of our lives. She always has been. And me? Linda asked quietly. Am I part of your life too? Or am I just a replacement? Jim looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that she couldn't quite make out. You know that's not true, he said finally, but I can't just write Emily off. She's important to Michael, and to me. Linda nodded, but her throat tightened. She stood up and went into the bedroom without saying another word. Jim didn't follow her. The next day, Emily came by to pick up Michael for the weekend. Linda was in the living room, packing his things. Oh, Linda, did you put his blue jacket in? Emily asked, looking into the bag. He loves it. Anna gave it to him. I put the green one, Linda answered, trying not to lose her temper. It's warm, and he wore it all week. Well, anyway, Emily smiled, but there was something condescending in her voice. I'll take the blue one, it suits him. Linda said nothing, but inside she was seething. When Emily and Michael left, she sat down on the couch and covered her face with her hands. She felt like a stranger in her own home. That evening, Jim returned from work earlier than usual. He found Linda in the kitchen, where she was washing dishes, although the dishwasher was half empty. Are you okay? He asked, leaning against the door frame. No, she answered without turning around. I'm not okay. He sighed and came closer. Because of yesterday? Linda, I didn't mean to hurt you. Emily means a lot to us. She was there when Anna died. She helped me keep my cool. I understand, Linda turned to him, drying her hands on a towel. But I'm your wife, and she acts like I'm temporary, and you let her. Jim opened his mouth to object, but stopped. Linda could see that he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. I won't allow it, he said finally. But I can't push her away. It would be wrong. Linda looked into his eyes. What about me? Is it right that I feel this way? He didn't answer. The silence hung between them, heavy and cold. Linda threw the towel on the table and went upstairs. By the summer of 2021, Linda had begun to notice little things she'd previously ignored. Jim texted Emily often, even late at night. He laughed at her messages, but when Linda asked what they were about, he'd say, nothing special. Sometimes he'd go with her to pick up Michael, and they'd be later than they should have been. Linda hated herself for her suspicions, but she couldn't shut them out. One day in July, she walked into Jim's office to get his phone charger. His laptop was open, and on the screen was a text from Emily. You know you can always count on me. Like that time, remember? Linda froze. She didn't want to read someone else's texts, but it was like a punch to the gut. What did "like that time" mean? What were they talking about? She closed her laptop and left, but the thoughts wouldn't go away. That evening, when Jim returned, she couldn't stand it. Jim, what's wrong with you and Emily? She asked bluntly, standing in the living room. What? He looked genuinely surprised. Nothing. She's a friend. A friend who texts you at night. Linda crossed her arms. I saw the message. Like then. What does that mean? Jim frowned. Have you been rummaging through my laptop? I wasn't rummaging, she raised her voice. I took the charger, and it was open. Answer me. What's going on with you? Nothing's happening, Jim shook his head. We're just talking. She supported me after Anna. That's all. Then why don't you tell me? Linda felt tears welling up. Why do I find out about you from messages? Because it's none of your business, he blurted out, but then stopped himself. Linda, I'm sorry. That's not what I meant. No, that's exactly what you said. She turned and walked into the bedroom, slamming the door. That night, Linda lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She loved Jim, she loved Michael, but she felt like she was losing them. Emily wasn't just a friend, she was a reminder of the past that Linda couldn't replace. And Jim, without realizing it, was holding on to that past. She didn't know how to fix it, but she knew that if nothing changed, their marriage wouldn't survive. Linda stood at the check-in counter at O'Hare Airport, holding Michael's hand. Jim was fiddling with his suitcase, checking his ticket on his phone. Outside, a snowstorm was raging, and the flight was already delayed an hour. Linda tried to smile, but inside she was seething. Tomorrow was Valentine's Day, and Jim was flying to Seattle for 3 days. "Are you sure you can't move it?" she asked quietly, while Michael looked at the planes through the glass. Jim sighed, not looking up from the screen. "Linda, I already told you. This is an important deal. If everything goes smoothly, I might get promoted." "I know," she nodded, looking at his suitcase. "It's just, tomorrow is a holiday. We were planning dinner. We'll celebrate when I get back." Jim finally looked at her. "I promise. We'll go somewhere, just you and me." Linda wanted to believe him, but his promises had been ringing hollow lately. She forced herself to smile. "Okay? Call when you land." "Sure." He leaned over and kissed her forehead, then sat down next to Michael. "Hey, kid, listen to Linda, okay? And don't eat too much candy." Michael chuckled. "And if there are only 3?" "2." Jim patted him on the head and stood up. "I'll call." Linda watched him walk through security until his silhouette disappeared into the crowd. Michael tugged at her sleeve. "Are we going home now?" "Yeah," she took his hand. "Let's go. Maybe we should order pizza." "With pepperoni?" His eyes lit up. "Agreed." At home, Linda put on a cartoon for Michael and started to put away the dishes. The kitchen was piled high with dishes. She hadn't washed them in 2 days because Jim had promised to help but hadn't found the time. Her phone vibrated and she grabbed it, hoping for a text from Jim. But it was Kara, her friend. "Black Linda, where are you and Jim going tomorrow?" "Paul and I are going to a new restaurant. Join us." Linda stared at the screen. She hadn't told Kara that Jim was leaving. She didn't want it to seem like she was complaining. But now she suddenly felt the urge to talk. "Linda, Jim is on a business trip. Michael and I will be alone." "Black, seriously? On Valentine's Day? That sucks. Come with us. Angie will babysit Michael." Linda shook her head, though Kara couldn't see it. Angie, Kara's younger sister, was a student and sometimes babysat Michael. But Linda didn't want to leave him with anyone on a day like this. "Linda, thanks, but I'm out. We'll manage." She put the phone down and went back to the dishes. Michael shouted from the living room. "Linda, the cartoon is over. I'll put another one on now." She wiped her hands and walked towards him. While she was looking for a new cartoon, her phone vibrated again. This time it was Instagram. Linda opened the app and immediately regretted it. Her feed was full of posts. Friends with bouquets, couples in restaurants, candles, wine, smiles. She scrolled through several stories and came across Emily's post. She posted an old photo with Anna and Jim, captioned, "Miss those days. Love forever." Linda felt her throat tighten. She closed the app and threw the phone on the couch. "Linda, what's wrong?" Michael looked at her, holding the remote control. "It's okay," she forced herself to smile. "Let's choose something fun." By evening, Linda was exhausted. Michael had refused to eat his vegetables, spilled juice on the carpet, and then thrown a tantrum because he wanted to sleep, but didn't want to lie down. When he finally fell asleep, she collapsed on the couch with a glass of wine. The phone was silent. Jim hadn't texted, even though he'd promised. She opened their chat and started typing, "Have you landed yet?" But then she deleted it. She didn't want to seem intrusive. Instead, she went back to Instagram. Wrong. More posts about love, dates, gifts. Kara posted a story, she and Paul at a bar, laughing, clinking cocktails. Linda felt a pang of envy. She loved Michael, she loved Jim, but now she felt lonely, like she was stuck in someone else's life. The phone rang and Linda jumped. Kara. "Hi," Linda replied, trying to sound cheerful. "Linda, why are you sitting at home?" Kara's voice was loud. Music was humming in the background. "Valentina is tomorrow, and you look like a nun." Kara, I'm with Michael. Linda rolled her eyes. And Jim's on a business trip. No time for the holidays. So what? Kara didn't let up. Leave Michael and Angie and come with us. We're going to the club tomorrow. It'll be fun. You're not going to whine at home all day, are you? I'm not whining, Linda frowned. I don't know. It's weird hanging out without Jim. It's weird to sit alone on a holiday, Kara chuckled. Listen, you're young and beautiful. Let's go dance and have a drink. Angie will sit with Michael. She adores him. Linda was silent. She didn't want to go anywhere. But the thought of spending the whole day watching cartoons and cleaning while Jim was somewhere in Seattle and her friends were having fun was unbearable. I'll think about it, she said finally. That means yes, Kara laughed. Tomorrow at 8, I'll pick you up. Dress nicely. Linda hung up and looked at her empty glass. Maybe Kara was right. Maybe she needed a distraction. On the morning of February 14th, Linda woke to the sound of her alarm clock. Michael was already running around the house, demanding pancakes. She got up, feeling exhausted. Jim hadn't written, only sent a smiley face in response to her message the night before. She tried not to think about it, but the hurt grew. Linda, can I have 2 pancakes? Michael sat at the table, swinging his legs. You can, she put a plate in front of him, but drink the juice first. Ugh, I don't want juice, he grimaced. Michael, don't start, Linda sighed. Drink, then pancakes. He muttered something, but obeyed. Linda looked at him and felt guilty. It wasn't Michael's fault that she was angry with Jim. She sat down next to him. Hey, do you want to have some fun today? She asked. Maybe we can go to the park. Will Dad come? Michael looked at her. Dad's on a trip. Linda tried to smile. But we'll manage, right? He nodded, but looked disappointed. Linda felt her heart clench. She wanted to make this day special, but she was barely holding on. During the day, she tried to keep Michael occupied. They built a snowman, watched Toy Story, even baked cookies, although half the dough ended up on the floor. But every time her phone beeped, Linda grabbed it, hoping for a text from Jim. Nothing. Only Kara wrote, "Getting ready. Don't change your mind." By 5 o'clock, Linda had given up. She called Kara. Okay, I'm going, she said, but only for a couple of hours. Yes, Kara screamed so loudly that Linda jerked the phone away. Angie will be here at 7. Put on that red dress, it's awesome. Linda hung up the phone and looked at Michael, who was drawing at the table. Hey, Michael, she sat down next to him. Angie's going to sit with you today. I'm going to go away for a bit, okay? Where are you going? He raised his head. To see a friend, Linda stroked his head. But I'll be back soon. Angie will bring popcorn. It will be fun. He nodded, but Linda could see he wasn't thrilled. She hated herself for it, but the loneliness was stronger. Angie arrived at 7 with a backpack and a bag of chips. Michael immediately dragged her to watch a cartoon, and Linda relaxed a little. She put on a red dress she hadn't worn in a year and put on makeup for the first time in a month. In the mirror, she looked better than she felt. Kara picked her up at 8. The music was blasting in the car, and Kara looked like she had been drinking. Oh my God, Linda, you're hot. Kara slapped her on the shoulder. We're going to rock tonight. I won't be long, Linda buckled up. Michael is with Angie, but I don't want to leave him for long. Relax, Kara rolled her eyes. Angie can handle this. You deserve to have some fun. The club was packed. The music was blaring, people were dancing, laughing, drinking. Kara immediately dragged Linda to the bar and ordered 2 cocktails. To you, Kara raised her glass, and to Jim regretting leaving. Linda smiled, but the drink tasted bitter. She looked around the room. Couples, friends, everyone happy. She wanted to go home to Michael, but the thought of an empty house was worse. Let's go dance. Kara grabbed her hand. Linda didn't resist. The music drowned out her thoughts, and for a moment she even felt alive. But then someone touched her shoulder. She turned around. A guy, about 30, with dark hair and a slight smile. Can I invite you? He asked, shouting over the music. Linda froze. She wanted to say no, but Kara had already pushed her. Go, she shouted. Have fun. Linda looked at the guy. He didn't look dangerous, just friendly, and she suddenly wanted to feel wanted, even for a minute. Okay, she said. One dance. The music in the club was pounding, the strobe lights were flashing, and Linda felt her head spinning from her third drink of the night. She was dancing with a guy who introduced himself as Zach. He was tall, with dark hair and a light stubble, and he smiled like he knew a secret. Kara disappeared into the crowd, leaving Linda with him, and she didn't resist. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about Jim or Emily or Michael. She was just having fun. Do you come here often? Zach asked, leaning toward her to be heard over the music. The first time in a year, Linda laughed, almost spilling her cocktail. It was my friend, she pulled me out. Lucky me, he winked. Want another drink? She wanted to say no, but instead she nodded. Just something light. I've already had a bit too much. Got it, Zach waved to the bartender. 2 mojitos, no biggie. They walked to the bar, and Linda leaned against the counter, trying to catch her breath. Zach was a trainer at the gym, liked to joke and tell stories about his clients. She listened, laughed, and with each word she felt lighter. He didn't ask about her life, and she liked that. No talk about her husband, her child, or her problems. Are you from Chicago? He asked when their drinks arrived. Yeah, all my life. Linda took a sip. And you? Moved here a couple of years ago. From Denver. There's more action here, you know. Yeah, right. She looked around the crowd. Today for sure. They chatted for another half hour, shouting over the music. Kara flashed through the crowd, dancing with a guy, and gave Linda a thumbs up. Linda rolled her eyes, but smiled. Zach noticed. Your friend is on fire, he said. Are you always this calm? Not always, Linda shrugged. It's just, I haven't been out for a long time. Then we need to make up for it, he extended his hand. Another dance? She hesitated for a second, but then took his hand. The music changed to something slow, and Zach pulled her closer. Linda felt her heart pound. His hands were on her waist, and she didn't pull away. The alcohol was drowning out the voice in her head that was screaming that this was wrong. By midnight, the club had become even noisier. Kara found them at the bar, already quite drunk. Linda, are you alive? She hugged her, almost knocking over Zach's glass. Is this guy okay? Kara, that's enough, Linda laughed, pushing her away. It's okay. I'm Zach. He extended his hand to Kara. I'm looking after your friend. Oh, I like it, Kara giggled. Linda, don't lose him. I'm going. Paul's waiting. She disappeared into the crowd, and Linda shook her head. Sorry, that's just the way she is, she said to Zach. It's okay, cheerful, he smiled. And what about you? Do you want to dance some more, or maybe we should get out of here? Linda froze. She knew what he meant. Part of her wanted to go home to Michael, to her life. But another part of her, the part that was tired of being alone and hurt, pulled her toward Zach. He looked at her, and there was nothing in his eyes except interest. No expectations, no memories of Anna. Where to? She asked quietly. There's a hotel nearby, he shrugged. We can just sit and have a drink. No pressure. She knew it was a lie, but she nodded. Okay, just for a little while. The hotel was 2 blocks from the club. Linda barely noticed the cold as they walked. Zach babbled on about something stupid, and she laughed, even though she couldn't hear half of it. In the hotel lobby, he took her hand, and she didn't pull away. In the elevator, he kissed her, and she kissed him back, even though everything inside her screamed that it was a mistake. The room was dark. Only the light from the street lamps filtered through the curtains. Zach opened the minibar and took out a bottle of wine. Will you have some? He asked, pouring himself some. No, Linda shook her head. I've had enough. He nodded and sat down next to her on the bed. They were silent for a minute, and Linda felt her resolve melting. She wanted to leave, but she stayed. When he kissed her again, she didn't resist. It all happened quickly, the clothes on the floor, his hands, her breathing. She didn't think about Jim, she didn't think about Michael, only about how much she needed to feel alive. Linda woke up the next morning to the sound of Zach's alarm on her phone. Her head was pounding and her mouth tasted of wine. She was in a strange bed and reality hit her like cold water. Zach was asleep next to her, his arm around her waist. Linda carefully crawled out from under the covers, trying not to wake him. Her dress was on the floor and her bag was by the door. She got dressed, grabbed her things, and slipped out of the room without looking back. It was cold outside, the blizzard had died down, but the snow crunched underfoot. Linda had called a cab and was sitting in the back seat, looking out the window. She was shaking, not from the cold, but from panic. She had betrayed Jim. She, who had sworn to love him, who had promised to be a mother to Michael. How could she? At home, Angie slept on the couch, Michael in his room. Linda quietly went into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and stood under the hot water until her skin turned red. But the feeling of dirt did not go away. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and did not recognize herself. The phone vibrated. Kara. Black, where are you? I woke up and you were gone. Linda clutched the phone, unsure of what to say. She dialed her number. Linda, Kara answered immediately, her voice hoarse. Are you alive? Where have you been? Linda trailed off, her voice shaking. Kara, I've done something wrong. What? Kara was wary. What happened? You went with that guy, right? Yes, Linda closed her eyes. I slept with him. At the hotel. There was silence on the other end. Then Kara exhaled. Oh, Linda. Okay, don't panic. Where are you now? At home, Linda swallowed. Kara, what should I do? I don't know how to fix this. Look, Kara spoke quickly. No one will know. It was just a night. You were drunk. Jim's in Seattle. He doesn't know. Just forget it. I can't forget. Linda raised her voice, but immediately fell silent, afraid to wake Angie. I cheated on him. I don't know how to live with this. Linda, calm down, Kara said firmly. You're not the first one to stumble. Jim dumped you on Valentine himself. It's not your fault. It's my fault. Linda felt tears streaming down her cheeks. I should have gone home, to Michael. Stop blaming yourself, Kara sighed. Listen, don't tell Jim. It'll just ruin everything. He won't know, and you'll go on living like before. Linda was silent. She knew Kara was trying to help, but her words weren't reassuring. She couldn't pretend it didn't happen. Not with Jim. Not with Michael. I must tell him, she said at last, when he comes back. Linda, are you crazy? Kara almost screamed. He will not forgive you. Think of Michael. Do you want to ruin everything? I've already ruined everything. Linda hung up and threw the phone on the sink. She woke Angie and thanked her for sitting with Michael. Angie, sleepy, just nodded and left. Linda went to check on Michael. He was asleep, hugging the teddy bear Anna had given him. Linda sat on the edge of his bed and looked at him until tears began to fall onto the blanket. She had promised to be his mother, and now she felt she didn't deserve it. Jim wrote around midday, Hey, are you okay? Busy, but I'll call you tonight. Linda looked at the message and didn't know what to say. She wrote, Everything is fine. Call me. But nothing was fine. She spent the rest of the day on autopilot. She cooked Michael's lunch, played Monopoly with him, and answered his questions. But inside, she felt empty. She couldn't look him in the eye, couldn't think of Jim without pain. Kara called twice more, but Linda didn't answer. In the evening, when Michael had fallen asleep, she sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea that she never drank. Jim was due back in 2 days. She knew she couldn't keep quiet. She loved him, despite everything, his aloofness, Emily, their fights. And that's why she had to be honest, even if it ruined their marriage. Linda picked up her phone and opened their chat. She wanted to text him now, but she stopped. This wasn't a text conversation. She would tell him face to face, and let it be what it will be. Linda stood at the stove, stirring spaghetti sauce. The smell of tomatoes and basil filled the kitchen, but she barely noticed it. Her hands moved mechanically, and her mind swirled around one thing: how to tell Jim. His flight had landed an hour ago, and he had texted that he would be home soon. Michael was sitting in the living room, watching a cartoon, and Linda tried to hold on for him. But inside, she was clenching with fear. She had been rehearsing the words all day. Jim, I made a terrible mistake. I was drunk, alone, but that's no excuse. I love you. She knew he would be furious, but she hoped her honesty would make a difference. She couldn't live with this secret. The key turned in the lock, and Linda jumped. Jim walked in, throwing his bag by the door. His face was stony, his eyes cold. She had never seen him like this. Hi, Linda wiped her hands on her apron, trying to smile. Dinner's almost ready. How was the flight? Jim didn't answer. He walked into the living room and turned off the TV, despite Michael's protests. Michael, go to your room, he said quietly but firmly. But I'm watching, Michael frowned. Right now, Jim raised his voice, and Michael muttered and went upstairs. Linda felt her heart pound. Something was wrong. She turned off the stove and turned to him. Jim, what happened? She asked, clutching the edge of the tabletop. He pulled out his phone, opened the video, and dropped it on the table. Linda looked at the screen. It was a club, February 14th. She was dancing with Zach, their bodies close, his hands on her waist. The video was short, but long enough to make sense. Linda felt the blood drain from her face. Who sent this? Her voice trembled. Emily. Jim spat the name out like it burned. She was at the club. Saw you. Said you left with this guy. Linda opened her mouth, but the words stuck. She wanted to explain, but Jim wouldn't let her. Are you serious? He took a step toward her, his voice full of rage. I'm on a business trip, and you're hanging out with some dude on Valentine's Day? Jim, please. Linda raised her hands defensively. I was going to tell you. I made a mistake. I was drunk. A mistake? He almost shouted, but stopped himself, looking back at the stairs. You call this a mistake? You cheated on me, Linda. I know. She felt tears streaming down her cheeks. I know what I did. I wanted to tell you, I swear. I love you, Jim. It was just one night. Enough, he cut her off, turning away. I don't want to hear this. You betrayed me. You betrayed Michael. The mention of Michael struck like a knife. Linda stepped toward him, holding out her hand. Jim, please listen. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was lonely. You were always disappearing, Emily. Don't you dare blame Emily. He turned, his eyes blazing. She showed me the truth. And you lied to me. How many more of these mistakes have there been? None, Linda shook her head, her voice breaking. Just this one. I swear, Jim. I love you. I love Michael. Please give me a chance. He looked at her, and for a second she thought he might soften. But then his face hardened again. I can't believe you, he said quietly. Not after this. Linda felt her legs give way. She grabbed the table to keep from falling. What do you want to do? She asked, barely whispering. I'm taking Michael and leaving. Jim walked toward the stairs. We'll stay with Emily until I figure out what to do. No, Linda rushed after him. Jim, you can't take him. He's my son. Your son? He turned, his voice full of contempt. You're not his mother, Linda. You were never Anna. Those words hit harder than anything else. Linda froze, feeling her heart breaking. She wanted to scream, to argue, but instead she fell to her knees, right on the kitchen floor. Jim, please, she grabbed his hand. Don't do this. I'll do anything to fix it. Don't take him away. He looked down at her, his eyes filled with nothing but pain and anger. He pulled his hand away. You've already destroyed everything, he said, and went upstairs. Linda remained on the floor, tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't move. She heard Jim calling Michael, asking why they were leaving. Then footsteps, the sound of a suitcase, the slam of a door. The car started, and all was quiet. She didn't know how long she sat on the floor. The sauce on the stove had cooled. The spaghetti was stuck together in the pan. The house was emptier than ever. Linda stood up, unsteadily, and walked into the living room. Michael's stuffed animal, the teddy bear Anna had given her, was lying on the couch. Linda picked it up and hugged it to her chest, choking with sobs. She wanted to call Kara, but she couldn't. Kara had warned her to keep quiet, but Linda was going to confess anyway, and now Emily had ruined everything. Linda hated her, but most of all she hated herself. She had ruined her family. She had lost Jim. She had lost Michael. Linda sat down on the couch, still clutching the teddy bear. The phone was on the table, but she didn't touch it. She had no one to call. No one could fix what she had done. She closed her eyes and sat in silence until the tears dried. Linda sat on the couch, staring at the off television. Michael's teddy bear was still lying nearby, untouched since Jim had left. A week had passed, but the house felt foreign. The dishes were piled high in the sink, and the untouched pizza Kara had delivered 2 days ago sat on the counter. Linda hadn't eaten or slept, only drank water when her throat was dry. Her phone was flooded with messages from Kara, but she hadn't answered. Jim hadn't texted. Neither had Michael. She dialed Jim's number every day, sometimes 10 times. He didn't pick up. One day she texted, "Please talk to me. I want to see Michael." The message went unanswered. Then she tried calling Emily, but the number was blocked. Linda even texted her on Messenger, but got a notification. "You can't message this user." Emily cut her off completely. Linda stood up to get some water, but her head spun and she grabbed the table. She hadn't eaten properly since Jim left, and her body was starting to give out. In the bathroom mirror, she saw herself. Pale skin, dark circles under her eyes, hair tangled. She turned away and went back to the couch. Kara called every day, but Linda didn't want to talk. She was ashamed. Kara had warned her not to tell Jim, but Linda hadn't listened, and now everything was ruined. She hated herself for that night with Zach, for letting Emily ruin her life, for failing to be the wife and mother she'd promised herself to be. Yesterday, she forced herself to go to the store because the refrigerator was empty. She put on a sweatshirt, pulled up the hood, and went to the nearest supermarket. But even there was no peace. At the checkout, she noticed 2 women from the school where she worked. They were whispering, looking at her. Linda tried to ignore it, but she heard snatches of them. Cheated on her husband. Poor child. She dropped her basket and left without buying anything. Rumors had spread, and Linda knew who started them. Emily. At home, she lay down on the couch and closed her eyes. She dreamed of Michael, calling her Mom, and then baking cupcakes. She woke up crying, and it was dark. Her phone blinked a text from Kara. "Linda, answer me. I'm worried. I'll be there tomorrow." Linda didn't answer. She didn't want Kara to see her like this. The next day, Kara knocked on the door. Linda didn't answer, but Kara didn't leave. She rang and knocked until Linda gave in. "Oh my God, Linda," Kara walked in, throwing her bag on the floor. "You're like a ghost. When did you eat?" Linda shrugged, sitting down on the sofa. "I don't remember. Yesterday, I think." Kara opened the pizza box and grimaced. "It's already covered in mold." "Are you serious?" She went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. "It's empty. Linda, what's wrong with you?" "Nothing." Linda stared at the floor. "I just don't want anything." Kara sat down next to her and took her hand. "Look, I know it's bad, but you can't do this. You're ruining yourself." "What should I do?" Linda looked at her, her voice shaking. "Jim's not answering. I can't see Michael. Everyone knows what I've done. I've lost everything." "You haven't lost everything." Kara squeezed her hand. "You have me. You have a job. You can start over." "I don't want to do it again." Linda pulled her hand away. "I want my family. I want Michael." Kara sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Linda, I understand. But you can't make him talk to you. Maybe give him time." "Time?" Linda smiled bitterly. "He's with Emily. She got what she wanted. I'm nothing to them." "Enough." Kara raised her voice. You're not a nobody. You made a mistake, yes, but you're not a murderer. Stop punishing yourself." Linda was silent. She knew Kara was right, but it didn't help. The pain was too much, and she saw no way out. "I'll bring some food," Kara stood up. "And you eat. At least soup, at least a sandwich. I won't leave until I see you." Kara went to the store, and Linda was alone. She picked up the phone and called Jim again. The phone beeped, then went to voicemail. She didn't leave a message, she'd already tried, and he hadn't called back. Then she opened the photo album. Pictures from their wedding, Michael with a daisy, Jim holding her on Lake Michigan. She scrolled until tears began to drip onto the screen. By early March, Linda was barely moving from the couch. Kara came every day, brought food, made her eat at least a couple of spoonfuls. But Linda was losing weight. Her clothes were hanging like they were on a hanger. She didn't sleep more than 2 hours a night. Thoughts of Jim and Michael wouldn't leave her. Sometimes she imagined Michael playing at Emily's, her cooking him lasagna, him forgetting Linda. That was the worst of it. One day she decided to go to Emily's house. She knew the address. Jim had mentioned it when they were still together. Linda got into the car, although her hands were shaking, and drove off. The house was small, with a neat lawn. Jim's car was parked at the entrance. Linda sat in the car across the street, looking at the windows. She saw shadows, but she couldn't make out who was there. She wanted to knock, but she didn't dare. What would she say? "Give me my son." Emily would call the police, and Jim would hate her even more. She went home and lay down. Kara called, but Linda didn't answer. She didn't care. She wanted the pain to go away, for it to be over. On March 10th, Kara arrived again. Linda opened the door, but didn't even look at her. "Linda, you look worse." Kara walked in, holding a bag of groceries. "I'm serious. You need to see a doctor." "I'm fine." Linda lay down on the sofa, pulling the blanket over her. "You're not okay." Kara threw the bag on the table. "You're not eating. You're not sleeping. I can't watch you destroy yourself." "Then don't look." Linda turned to the wall. "Go away." Kara froze, then sat down next to him. "Linda, I won't leave. You're my friend. I won't let you give up like this." Linda was silent. She felt tears burning her eyes, but she didn't want to cry in front of Kara. "I can't live without them," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "Without Michael. Without Jim." "I know," Kara patted her shoulder, "but you can't stop living. You're stronger than you think." Linda shook her head. She didn't feel strong. She felt empty. Kara stayed for a couple of hours and made Linda drink some broth. Then she left, promising to return in the evening. Linda was left alone. She looked at Michael the bear, at the phone, at the empty house. It was too hard for her. She went to the bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet. Kara returned 3 hours later. She knocked and rang the bell, but Linda didn't answer. Kara panicked and used the spare key Linda had given her a year ago. She found Linda on the couch, pale, breathing slowly. An empty bottle lay nearby. "Linda!" Kara screamed, shaking her. "Wake up, please." Linda didn't respond. Kara grabbed the phone and dialed 911. "Help!" She almost screamed. "She's breathing, but she's not waking up. Please, come." The dispatcher told her to check Linda's pulse and not to touch her. Kara sat next to her, holding her hand until the ambulance arrived. The paramedics took Linda away, and Kara rode with them, crying and repeating that she shouldn't have left her. At the hospital, Linda had her stomach pumped. The doctor told Kara that she had arrived just in time another hour, and it could have been too late. Linda came to a few hours later, weak but alive. Kara was sitting by her bed, holding her hand. "You scared the living daylights out of me," Kara said, her voice shaking. "Don't you dare do that again." Linda looked at her, her eyes empty. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't mean to." "I know," Kara squeezed her hand. "But you're alive, and I won't let you go there again. Roll down." Linda nodded, but inside, nothing had changed. She was alive, but she didn't know how to move on. Michael and Jim were still far away, and her mistake was still there. But Kara was there, and that was the only thing keeping her from the edge. Linda sat on the narrow bed in Kara's room, looking out the window. Outside, Chicago was drowning in gray rain in April. Her things, 2 bags of clothes and a box of books, were piled against the wall. She hadn't returned to her house since the hospital. Kara had insisted that Linda move in with her, and Linda hadn't argued. She didn't care where she was. She wouldn't survive in a house that smelled of Michael and Jim. Kara walked in holding 2 mugs of coffee. Here, she handed one to Linda. And don't say you don't want it. Drink it. Linda took the mug, but didn't take a sip. She held it in her hands, feeling the warmth. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. Stop thanking me. Kara sat down in the chair opposite. You would have done the same for me. How did therapy go yesterday? Linda shrugged. After the hospital, the doctor insisted on sessions with a psychologist. Twice a week, Linda went to the center, sat in an office with soft chairs, and answered questions. How are you feeling? What's bothering you? She told the truth. I don't feel anything. I don't want anything. The psychologist, a woman in her 50s named Rita, nodded and wrote down. Linda didn't see the point, but she went so Kara wouldn't worry. Fine, she replied. We talked. She asked about Michael. Kara frowned. Did you tell her? Yes, Linda looked into her mug. That I lost him. That he hates me. Linda, he's a kid. Kara shook her head. He doesn't hate you. It's Jim. He's making things difficult. Linda didn't answer. She tried to contact Jim after the hospital, but he'd changed his number. She wrote a letter, a real one, on paper and sent it to Emily's address, begging to talk to Michael. There was no answer. Kara had learned through friends that Jim had filed for divorce. Linda had received the papers last week. She signed them without reading them and sent them back. She didn't have the strength to argue. Have you eaten today? Kara asked, changing the subject. In the morning, Linda lied. She hadn't eaten since last night, but she didn't want Kara to force her again. Kara looked at her, but didn't argue. Okay, I'm going to work. I'll be back by 7. Call me if anything happens. Linda nodded, and Kara left. The silence in the apartment was heavy. Linda put her mug on the table and lay down, looking at the ceiling. She didn't cry. She had run out of tears back in the hospital. There was only emptiness, as if someone had turned off the lights inside. Therapy didn't help. Rita was kind, but her questions only reminded Linda of what she had lost. At one session in early May, Rita asked, Linda, what do you want now? If not to think about the past. Linda was silent for a minute, looking at her hands. I don't know, she said finally. I don't want anything. That's normal, Rita smiled. You've been through a lot of pain, but maybe there's something small. A walk? A book? Linda shook her head. I just want Michael, her voice wavered, but I can't. Rita nodded, writing something down. You miss him. That's understandable. But you can't control Jim's actions. What can you do for yourself? Linda didn't answer. She didn't know. After the session, she went back to Kara and lay down. Kara tried to take her for walks, to a cafe, even to the cinema, but Linda refused. It was easier for her to sit in a room where no one reminded her of the past. But the past still found her. One day, in mid-May, she went to the supermarket to buy groceries for Kara. At the checkout, she ran into a colleague from school, Marge. Linda hadn't seen her since February, when rumors of her infidelity spread. Linda? Marge looked at her in surprise. You? How are you? It's fine, Linda looked down, clutching the basket. I heard you and Jim. Marge hesitated. I sympathize. It must be hard. Linda nodded without looking at her. She wanted to run away, but Marge continued. You know, I saw Michael with his dad last week. He's gotten so big. Linda froze. Her heart sank. Where? She asked without looking up. In the park, not far from the school, Marge shrugged. They were with some women. Emily, I think. Linda felt her throat tighten. She mumbled a thank you and walked away, leaving the basket behind. In the car, she sat, gripping the steering wheel until she could breathe normally. Michael was so close, and she didn't know. Emily was with him. Emily, who had taken her family. That evening, Kara returned from work and found Linda on the couch, with red eyes. What happened? Kara dropped her bag and sat down next to him. I saw Marge, Linda said quietly, looking at the floor. She saw Michael, with Jim and Emily. Kara cursed. That Emily is everywhere, she shook her head. Linda, don't think about it. They're not worth your tears. He's my son, Linda looked at her. I can't help but think. Kara fell silent, then hugged her. I'm sorry, she said. I want you to feel better. He won't, Linda pulled away. Jim won't let me see him. He hates me. Michael probably does too. Enough, Kara took her by the shoulders. Michael loves you. He's a child. He doesn't understand what's going on. And Jim, he's just angry. Maybe in time. There won't be any time, Linda shook her head. They're leaving. Kara froze. What? Who told you? I heard from a friend at school, Linda swallowed. Jim and Michael are moving to Denver. Emily is going with them. Kara opened her mouth, but found no words. She stood up and walked around the room. Is it true? She asked finally. Yes, Linda closed her eyes. I called Jim's lawyer. He confirmed. They're leaving in June. Kara cursed again, then sat down next to him. Linda, you have to fight, she said. You're his mother. You have rights. What rights? Linda smiled bitterly. I'm not his real mother. I'm nobody. Jim won't even let me talk to him. Kara was silent. She knew Linda was right. The law was on Jim's side, and Emily had done everything to make sure Linda was left with nothing. By June, Linda was a shadow of her former self. She went to therapy, ate when Kara forced her, but life felt meaningless. She wasn't working, she'd taken a leave of absence from school, saying she couldn't cope. Coworkers stopped calling, rumors died down, but the emptiness remained. One evening, June 15th, Linda sat in Kara's room, sorting through a box of her things. She found a copy of the marriage certificate Jim had sent with the divorce papers. She looked at the paper, at her signatures, at the date June 2018. 4 years ago, she was happy. Now, there was nothing left. Kara walked in holding a pizza. Dinner, she said, but stopped when she saw the paper in Linda's hands. What is this? Testimony. Linda didn't look up. Jim's and mine. Kara sat down next to him. Why are you keeping this? Throw it away. Linda shook her head. I can't, she said. This is all I have left. Linda, that's not all. Kara took her hand. You have you, and me, and a future. What future? Linda looked at her. Michael's leaving. Jim's leaving. I'll be alone. Kara was silent, then stood up. Come on, she said, taking the certificate. Let's do something. Linda didn't want to, but she followed her. Kara led her out into the yard where there was a metal trash barrel. She took out a lighter. Burn this. Kara held out the certificate. Don't hold on to it. It's dragging you down. Linda looked at the paper, then at Kara. Her hands were shaking, but she picked up the lighter. She held the flame to the edge of the certificate, and the paper caught fire. Linda threw it into the barrel, watching the fire consume their names, their vows. She didn't cry. She just watched until there was only ashes left. This is the end, she said quietly. No, Kara hugged her. It's a start. You can do it, Linda. I know it. Linda didn't answer. She didn't trust Kara, but the fire in the barrel was real. He had taken away her past, and maybe that was right. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. Jim stood in the kitchen of their new house in Denver, stirring his coffee. The mountains stretched out the window, but he barely noticed them. Michael sat at the table, finishing a piece of toast and leafing through a comic book. Boxes of clothes still cluttered the corner they'd moved in a month ago, but they'd had no time to unpack. Jim's new job at a construction company was eating up his days, and Michael was preparing for first grade at a new school. "Dad, can I go to the park today?" Michael looked up from his comic book. "There are kids playing football there. If you do your homework," Jim sipped his coffee, "and more than one, take Tom." Tom was a neighbor boy Michael had befriended a week after moving in. Jim was glad his son was making friends, but he still kept an eye on him. Denver was a new world, and he wanted Michael to feel safe. "Okay," Michael nodded and returned to the comic. "Is Emily coming?" Jim tensed. Emily was staying in Chicago, but she had promised to come over for the weekend. She had helped them move, found the house through friends, and even paid for some of the furniture. Jim was grateful, but her presence sometimes seemed too intrusive. "Not today," he said. "Maybe tomorrow. Eat, or you'll be late." Michael shrugged and took a bite of toast. Jim looked at him and felt a twinge of guilt. The move had been his decision, a new job, a fresh start, away from Chicago, away from Linda, away from everything that reminded him of the past. But he could see that Michael missed his old life, even if he didn't say so. Jim got a job with a company that built apartment complexes. The work was harder than in Chicago, but the pay was better, and he could provide for Michael. His day started at 7 in the morning and ended at 6 at night, sometimes later. He came home exhausted, but he tried to make time for Michael. They played video games, watched movies, and sometimes went to a local park. Denver was beautiful, with clean air and open people, but Jim still felt like an outsider. At night, when Michael was asleep, Jim sat in the living room with a beer, looking at the boxes. He tried not to think about Linda, but her face kept coming back to him. Their fights, her tears, the day he saw the video at the club. He forbade himself to feel sorry for her. She had betrayed him, betrayed Michael. But sometimes, in the quiet, he wondered if he had done the right thing, cutting her off completely. Emily called almost every day, asking how they were, offering to come over. Jim appreciated her help, but her constant reminders of Linda, "She didn't deserve you. You did the right thing," irritated him. He didn't want to talk about Linda. He didn't want to think about her. But Michael did. One evening, as Jim was preparing dinner macaroni and cheese, Michael's favorite, his son, approached him with a question. "Dad, does Linda not love us anymore?" Michael stood in the doorway, holding an old photograph. Jim froze, clutching his spoon. He recognized the photo, the three of them on Lake Michigan, summer 2018. Linda was laughing, Michael was hugging her, Jim was standing next to her. He thought he had put all the photos away, but this one must have gotten lost in the boxes. "Where did you find this?" he asked, trying to speak calmly. "In the box," Michael shrugged. "My toys were still in there." Jim wiped his hands on a towel and picked up the picture. Linda looked happy. They all looked happy. He felt his throat tighten. "Michael, I told you not to go through the boxes," he said, placing the photo on the table. "But I miss her." Michael looked at him, his eyes serious. "Why doesn't she call?" Jim turned away, stirring his pasta. He didn't know what to say. He hadn't told Michael about the club, about the divorce, only that Linda would no longer be with them. Michael was too young to understand, and Jim didn't want him to hate her. But he didn't want his son to miss her either. "She's far away," he said finally. "She has her own life now." "But she's Mom," Michael frowned. "She promised to always be there." Jim gritted his teeth. Linda wasn't his real mother, but she was to Michael. He didn't know how to explain her betrayal without breaking his son's heart. "Sometimes people leave," he said, trying to sound gentle. "But we have us. You and me, and Emily helps." Michael nodded, but he looked disappointed. He took the photo and went to his room. Jim watched him go, guilt weighing on his chest. He hated Linda for what she had done, but he also hated himself for not being able to give Michael answers. School started at the end of August, and Michael quickly settled in. He made friends, joined a soccer team, and Jim was happy to see his son come alive. But in the evenings, Michael would sometimes be quiet, leafing through old comic books or looking out the window. Jim knew he was thinking about Linda, but he didn't bring it up. He was afraid that talking would only stir up the wounds. Emily came for the weekend as promised. She brought Michael a new backpack and a bunch of sweets, and Jim a bottle of whiskey. "You look tired," she said as they sat in the kitchen and Michael played in the yard. "Work," Jim shrugged, cracking open a beer. "But it's okay. We're coping." "You're doing great," Emily smiled. "Michael looks happy. You gave him a new start." Jim nodded, but her words didn't warm him. He didn't feel like a good guy. He felt like a man running from the past, but it was still catching up. "And what about you?" he asked, changing the subject. "Aren't you tired of Chicago?" "I'm tired of it," Emily laughed. "I'm thinking of coming here for a couple of months, finding a job, being closer to you." Jim tensed. He was grateful to Emily, but her constant presence was beginning to weigh on him. She was a part of their lives, but sometimes she seemed too close. He didn't want to tell her this, she had done so much for them, but the thought of her moving to Denver didn't appeal to him. "We'll see," he said evasively. "It's not that easy to find work here." "I can handle it," Emily winked. "You know I won't give up." He nodded, but Linda was in his head. Emily always compared herself to her, even if she didn't say it outright. And Jim, without meaning to, did the same. Linda was different, soft, warm, even when she was angry. Emily was sharp, insistent. He pushed the thoughts away, but they kept coming back. That evening, after Emily had left, Michael brought up Linda again. Jim was putting him to bed when his son pulled the same photo out from under his pillow. "Dad, does Linda still love us?" he asked, looking at the photo. Jim sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the fatigue wash over him. He didn't want to have this conversation, but Michael was looking at him, waiting for an answer. "I don't know," he said finally. "Sometimes people make mistakes, and everything changes." "But she didn't want to," Michael frowned. "She was always kind. She made me cupcakes." Jim swallowed. He remembered Linda baking with Michael, laughing as they smeared the dough all over the table. He hated himself for those memories, but they were stronger than he was. "Maybe she did," he said quietly, "but we're here now, and we have to move on." Michael nodded, but clutched the photo to his chest. Jim turned off the light and walked out, feeling something inside him break. He went down to the living room, opened a beer, and sat down on the couch. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to think about Linda with something other than anger, doubt. What if he had been too harsh? What if she really wanted to fix everything? He knew she had tried to reach out, but he had cut her off because the pain was too great. Now he wasn't sure if he had done the right thing. He took out his phone and opened their old chat. Linda's last message was in March. "Please let me talk to Michael." He didn't answer then. He didn't answer now. But as he closed the phone, he felt for the first time unsure of his decision. Maybe he had taken away not only Linda, but also Michael's chance at a family. Linda stood outside Jim's house in Denver, clutching the handle of her suitcase. The snow crunched under her feet, and her breath puffed out in the frosty air. She had been away from this world, Jim and Michael's world, for a year. Therapy, work, moving in with Kara had all helped her get back on her feet, but the emptiness remained. She had flown to Denver unannounced, afraid that Jim would say no if she called. Now, standing at the door, she wondered if she had done the right thing. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the doorbell. Silence. Then footsteps, and the door opened. Jim froze when he saw her. His face was a mixture of shock and anger. He looked older, the lines around his eyes were deeper, his hair a little grayer. "Linda," his voice was cold. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed, trying to speak firmly. "I came to see Michael." "Are you serious?" Jim crossed his arms. "After everything? You think you can just show up like that?" "I don't want to fight." Linda raised her hand. "I just want to see him. Please, Jim." He opened his mouth to answer, but then Michael's voice came from inside the house. "Dad, who's there?" The boy appeared in the doorway, holding a soccer ball. His eyes widened. "Linda?" Linda felt her throat tighten. Michael had grown taller, his hair was longer, but his smile was the same. He dropped the ball and lunged at her, hugging her so tightly she almost fell over. "You've arrived." He looked up at her. "I knew you'd come back." Linda hugged him, holding back tears. She looked at Jim, who stood there with his jaw clenched. "Michael, come into the house," he said, not taking his eyes off Linda. "But it's Linda." Michael frowned. "She's my mother." The word mom struck Linda like lightning. She saw Jim tense up, but he didn't argue with his son. Instead, he sighed and backed away. "Okay," he said. "Come in, but just for today." Linda nodded, not trusting her voice. She picked up her suitcase and walked in, Michael still holding her hand. The house was simple wooden floors, a couch, toys scattered about. There were photos on the wall, Michael at a football game, Jim with his colleagues. Nothing from their old life. Linda tried not to look. "Want to see my room?" Michael pulled her toward the stairs. "I have a new Batman poster." "Of course," Linda smiled, glancing at Jim. He was silent, but his eyes said, "Don't overdo it." As Michael showed her his room, the posters, the construction sets, the soccer medals, Linda listened, nodding and asking questions. He chartered away, talking about school, his friends, the goal he'd scored last week. Linda felt a warmth she hadn't felt in a year. But every time she caught Jim's eye in the doorway, the warmth turned to cold. "Michael, that's enough for today," Jim said after half an hour. "Linda has to go." But she just arrived. Michael crossed his arms. "Let her stay." Linda crouched down to be at his eye level. "I'll be back," she said softly. "I promise. But Dad's right. I have to go." Michael frowned but nodded. Linda hugged him, inhaling the scent of his shampoo. She stood up and turned to Jim. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "Alone." Jim paused, then nodded. "Michael, go play," he said. "We're in the kitchen." Michael left, and Linda followed Jim. The kitchen was small, with a smell of coffee and freshly cut grass coming from the open window. Jim leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Speak," he said, "but don't expect me to be happy." Linda clasped her hands, gathering her courage. "I know what I did," she began, "and I know you hate me. I don't blame you. But Michael, he's a part of my life. I want to see him. Not every day, not all the time. Just sometimes." Jim looked at her, his face unreadable. "Do you think you can come back after everything?" he asked. "After what you've done?" "I'm not coming back to you." Linda shook her head. "I'm not asking for forgiveness for us. I'm asking for it for Michael. He missed me. You saw that." "He's a kid." Jim raised his voice, but then fell silent, looking back at the door. "He doesn't understand what you did, but I do." Linda swallowed, feeling tears welling up. "I'm not the same person I was a year ago," she said. "I've been through hell, Jim. Therapy, the hospital, everything. I'm not asking you to believe me, but I won't hurt Michael. Ever." Jim turned away, looking out the window. Linda waited, her heart pounding. She knew he could throw her out right now, and there would be nothing she could do. "Why did you come?" he asked finally. "Why now?" "Because I couldn't anymore," Linda said quietly. "I lost everything. But Michael, he's still my son, even if you don't want him to be." Jim was silent. Linda saw his hands clenched into fists, then relaxed. He turned to her. "If I agree," he said slowly, "there will be no talk about the past. No explanations. You don't tell him what happened, and you don't interfere in my life." Linda nodded, not believing her ears. "I agree," she said. "Anything you say." "And that doesn't mean I trust you." Jim looked into her eyes. "One wrong move, and you'll never see him again." "I understand." Linda pressed her lips together. "Thank you, Jim." He nodded, but there was no warmth in his gaze. He walked to the door and called Michael. The boy came running, holding the ball. "Linda will stay with you today," Jim said, "but she's leaving tonight." "Cool," Michael beamed. "Can we go to the park?" Linda looked at Jim, waiting for his reaction. He nodded. "Just for a little while," he said, "and keep the phone on." At the park, Michael was running around the playground, playing football with the other kids. Linda sat on a bench, watching him. Jim had stayed home, and she was grateful for that. She needed time with Michael without his cold gaze. Linda, look. Michael kicked the ball, and it flew past the makeshift goal. Almost scored. Well done, Linda laughed, clapping her hands. Try again. He ran back, and Linda felt something inside her thaw. She knew it was only a day, that Jim hadn't forgiven her, that everything could fall apart. But Michael was here now, and that was more than she had ever dared hope for. When they got home, Michael hugged her goodbye. Will you come again? He asked, looking at her. Yes, Linda stroked his head, if Dad allows it. She looked at Jim, who stood in the doorway. He said nothing, but nodded. Linda picked up her suitcase and walked away, feeling her heart beat faster. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't family. But it was a step, and she held onto it like a lifeline. Linda sat at the kitchen table in Jim's house, helping Michael with his math. His textbook was open to a problem about fractions, and Michael was frowning as he drew circles in his notebook to figure out how to divide a pizza. Outside in Denver, the March wind blew dry leaves, and the house smelled of freshly brewed coffee, which Jim was drinking in the living room with his laptop. Linda, if I eat half the pizza, how much will be left? Michael looked at her, holding a pencil. Half, Linda smiled. If a whole pizza is one, and you ate half of one, then how much? Half of one, Michael beamed as he wrote down the answer. Exactly, she patted his head. You're a good boy. Michael returned to his tasks, and Linda glanced at Jim. His back was to them, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Ever since she had started coming to Denver every other week to pick Michael up from school or spend the day with him, Jim had been distant. He said hello, sometimes asked how she was doing, but he was never alone with her. Linda respected his boundaries, but she could see the longing in his eyes, especially when Michael laughed or put his arm around her. She had arrived this morning, picked Michael up from school, and stayed for dinner at his request. Jim hadn't objected, but his silence had been heavy. Linda felt that their fragile agreement she would see Michael, but stay out of Jim's life could crumble with one wrong word. Done. Michael closed the notebook. Can we play now? If Dad allows it. Linda looked at Jim, who looked up from his laptop. Go, but only for half an hour, he said. Then dinner. Michael ran to his room, and Linda stayed at the table, gathering up her textbooks. Jim closed his laptop and went to the coffee maker, pouring himself another cup. Do you want it? He asked without turning around. Yes, thank you. Linda was surprised. He rarely offered anything other than water. Jim placed a mug in front of her and sat down opposite her, looking out the window. The silence was awkward, and Linda decided to take a chance. He's a good student, she said, nodding at Michael's notebook. The teacher praised him last week. Yeah, Jim nodded. He tries. He loves math. Like you, Linda smiled, remembering how Jim had helped her with her taxes when they were married. You've always been good with numbers. Jim looked at her, and his face softened for a second, but then he turned away. It was a long time ago, he said quietly. Linda squeezed her mug. She knew she shouldn't press, but his longing was almost palpable. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he avoided conversation, the way he closed off when Michael mentioned Chicago. Jim, she began carefully, I can see that this is hard for you. If you want to talk, I'm not the enemy. He tensed, his fingers tightening around the mug. What is there to talk about? He asked, without looking at her. Everything is clear. It's not clear, Linda shook her head. You keep everything inside. Michael notices it. He asked me why I was sad. Jim looked at her sharply. Did he say so? Yes, Linda said softly. Last time we went for a walk. He's worried about you. Jim turned away, rubbing his neck. Linda waited, afraid he would get up and leave, as he always did when the conversation became personal. But he stayed. I'm not sad, he said finally. Am just tired. Work, Michael, that's all. It's not just work, Linda ventured. I know you think about the past, about me, about Anna. Anna's name hung in the air like a stone. Jim clenched his jaw, but did not object. Linda continued, trying to speak calmly. You never talked about her, she said, even when we were together. But she was always with you. And I don't want you to keep this to yourself. Why are you doing this? Jim turned to her, his voice sharp. You want me to spill the beans? To what? To make you feel better. Linda looked him in the eye. You don't have to trust me, but Michael needs you. The real you, not the one hiding behind his work. Jim was silent, looking at his mug. Linda thought he was going to throw her out, but instead he spoke, quietly, almost in a whisper. Anna died in 2 days, he said. Cancer. We didn't even know she had it until it was too late. She was everything. To me, to Michael. And then she was gone. Linda froze, afraid to move. Jim had never spoken about Anna so openly. She waited for him to continue. I thought I could handle it, he said, looking down at the table. For Michael. But every day without her was empty. And then you came along, and I thought I could live again. But you know how it ended. Linda swallowed, feeling a guilt that never went away. I know, she said, and I'll never forgive myself for it. Jim shook his head. It's not just you, he said. I was afraid that if I fell in love again, everything would fall apart again, like with Anna. And when I saw that video, it was like proof that I was right. Linda felt tears stinging her eyes, but she held back. She wanted to touch his hand, but she didn't dare. You were wrong, she said quietly. I loved you. And Michael, I made a mistake, but that doesn't mean it was all a lie. Jim looked at her, and there was a pain in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. I don't know what was true, he said, and I don't know if I can trust anyone again. Linda nodded, realizing he wasn't just talking about her. He was talking about himself, about his fear, about the wound that wouldn't heal. You don't have to trust, she said. Just don't close yourself off from Michael. He loves you, and he needs you to be with him. Jim was silent, then nodded. I'm trying, he said, for him. They sat in silence until Michael ran into the kitchen, holding the PlayStation controller. Dad, Linda, come play. He pulled Linda by the hand. I chose racing. Linda laughed, wiping her eyes. I'm coming, she said, standing up, but I'll overtake you. Nope. Michael ran into the living room. Jim remained at the table, looking at his mug. Linda wanted to say something else, but decided against it. She followed Michael, feeling that their conversation was a small, fragile one, but a step nonetheless. In April, Linda visited more often, sometimes taking Michael for the weekend if Jim allowed it. They went to the park, baked pizza, and watched cartoons. Jim kept his distance, but he no longer looked at her with coldness. Sometimes he even asked how things were in Chicago, and Linda answered briefly, without going into detail. She knew their balance was precarious, and she did not want to upset it. One day in late April, she stayed after dinner to help Michael with a biology project. Jim was sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone. As Michael ran off to get glue, Linda turned to Jim. Thank you, she said, for letting me be with him. He looked at her, his face was tired, but not angry. He's happy when you're here, he said. That's the main thing. Linda nodded, feeling warmth at his words. She knew they would never be a family like they once were. But what they had now, these moments with Michael, these rare conversations with Jim, was enough. For now. Jim's house in Denver was bustling. Michael had just turned 8, and the yard was decorated with balloons and garland and a table of pizza and cupcakes. Kids from school and the soccer team ran around playing tag while Michael showed off a new soccer ball a neighbor had given him. Linda stood at the table handing out juice and watched Michael. He was beaming, and it warmed her. Jim was in the yard, watching the kids and occasionally glancing at Linda. Their eyes met, but he quickly looked away. Linda had arrived the day before to help with the preparations. She and Jim had agreed to surprise Michael with a bike he had been dreaming about for months. Linda bought it in Chicago and shipped it to Denver, and Jim hid it in the garage. The plan was to open the gift after the cake, and Linda was eagerly awaiting Michael's reaction. "Linda, we're running out of cupcakes," Michael shouted, running up to the table, his cheeks red from running. "I'm already bringing it," she smiled, taking out a new plate. "But first, wipe your face, you're all covered in chocolate." Michael chuckled, wiped his cheek with his sleeve, and ran away. Linda watched him go, feeling warm. These moments with him were what she had held on for all year. Therapy, work, moving in with Kara, all of it had helped her get back on her feet. But Michael was the one giving her life back. Jim walked up to the table, holding an empty bottle of lemonade. "We need to bring some more," he said, nodding at the bottle. "There's some in the garage." "I'll go." Linda wiped her hands on her apron. "I'll check the bike while I'm at it." He nodded, but paused. "He's happy," Jim said, looking at Michael, who was jumping with his friends. "Thanks for helping." "It's for him," Linda shrugged, but her heart began to beat faster. Jim rarely said things like that, and each time it was like a small bridge between them. They walked into the garage together. The bike was in the corner, covered with an old blanket. Linda took it down, checking the wheels. "Do you think he'll be happy?" she asked, looking at the bright blue frame. "He'll be happy," Jim almost smiled. "He's been talking about him all year." Linda nodded, feeling the awkwardness dissolve. They stood close, and she noticed how tired he looked, the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. She wanted to ask if he was okay, but the children started screaming in the yard, and the moment was gone. By evening the guests had left. Michael was delighted with the bike and immediately rode it around the yard until Jim drove it home. Linda helped clear the dishes while Michael took a shower. The house was empty and the silence was almost cozy. Jim opened a beer and offered it to her. "Will you have some?" he asked, standing by the refrigerator. "Yes." Linda took the bottle, feeling her nerves tighten. She knew she was going to talk to him today. She'd been rehearsing it in her head all week, but now the words felt heavy. They sat at the kitchen table, Michael already asleep upstairs. Linda twirled the bottle in her hands, gathering her courage. "Jim," she began, looking at the table, "I want to talk about us." He tensed, his fingers tightening around the bottle. "What do you mean, about us?" he asked, his voice cautious. Linda swallowed, forcing herself to look up. "I still love you," she said quietly. "I know what I've done. I know you can't trust me, but I can't pretend I don't feel anything. I want to try again. For Michael. For us." Jim looked at her, his face unmoving. She waited, her heart pounding. She knew she was risking everything, their fragile agreement, her right to see Michael. But silence was worse. "Are you serious?" he asked finally, his voice low. "After everything that happened, you think I can just forget?" "I'm not asking you to forget." Linda shook her head. "I'm asking you to give us a chance. I'm not who I was. I've been working on myself, Jim. Therapy, everything. I don't want to let you down again." He turned away, looking out the window. Linda could see his jaw clench, struggling with himself. "I can't," he said finally. "I can't go through this again. You ruined everything, Linda. I can't trust you." Her throat tightened, but she didn't back down. "I know," she said, "and I don't blame you. But you said to yourself that you were afraid to love because of Anna. You can't live in fear forever. Michael deserves a family. We both love him." Jim stood up abruptly, placing the bottle on the table. "Don't talk about Michael," he said, his voice sharp. "You have no right to use him." "I'm not using it." Linda stood up, her voice shaking. "I love him. And you. I want us to be a family. Not right away, not like before, but at least try." He looked at her, and there was a mixture of anger and pain in his eyes. Linda waited, afraid that he was going to throw her out. But instead, he sighed and sat back down. "I don't know, Linda," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can. You were everything to me. And then I saw that video, and everything fell apart. Linda nodded, feeling tears welling up. I know, she said, and I'll never forgive myself. But I'm here. I'm not running away. I want to prove that I can be better. Jim was silent, looking at his hands. Linda waited, feeling the time dragging on. She knew he might say no, and then it would all be over. But she couldn't stay silent any longer. Let's do it this way, she said when the silence became unbearable. Not love, not marriage, just friendship. For Michael, let me be there, help. If it doesn't work out, I'll leave. But give me a chance. Jim looked at her, his eyes tired. Friendship? He asked. Do you really think this will work? I don't know, Linda shrugged, but I want to try. For him. He was silent, then nodded. Okay, he said, but no promises, and if anything goes wrong, you leave. No arguments. I agree, Linda nodded, feeling relief mixed with fear. And one more thing, Jim looked into her eyes. There's a guest room. If you want to be closer to Michael, you can live there. But that doesn't mean we're together. Linda froze. She hadn't expected this. Moving to Denver, to his house, even to a separate room, was more than she had dared to hope for. Are you serious? She asked, her voice shaking. Yes, Jim nodded. Michael will be pleased. But that's all, Linda. No expectations. I understand. She pressed her lips together to keep from crying. Thank you, Jim. Linda folded laundry in the spare room of Jim's house, listening to Michael yelling in the yard as he played soccer with the neighborhood kids. June in Denver was warm, smelling of cut grass and apple blossoms. She had lived there for a month, occupying a small room with a narrow bed and a dresser. Her life revolved around Michael, picking him up from school, helping him with his homework, baking him muffins. Jim was more complicated. He was polite, sometimes joking, but he kept her at arm's length, as if she were a neighbor instead of the woman he had once shared his life with. Linda tried not to push. She had promised friendship, and she had kept her word, though it hurt to see Jim every day, his tired smile, his hands that she had once loved. She still loved him, and that love sat inside her like a splinter. But Jim seemed to have moved on. In early June, she noticed a change. He started staying late at work more often, coming home with a small smile that Linda hadn't seen in months. One evening, he got a text and laughed, quickly putting his phone away. Linda didn't ask, but her heart sank. She knew that look. It was the way he'd looked at her when they first started dating. The suspicions were confirmed a week later. Michael, chatting over dinner, mentioned, Dad went to a cafe with Sarah yesterday. She's funny, she gave me candy. Linda froze, holding her fork. Jim, sitting opposite her, tensed. Michael, eat, he said without looking at Linda. Who is Sarah? Linda asked, trying to sound neutral. Coworker, Jim shrugged. We were discussing the project. Nothing special. Linda nodded, but inside she was seething. She knew he was lying. Not directly, but there was something evasive in his voice. She said nothing, but she kept an eye on him over the next few days. He texted more often, left in the evenings, saying he was meeting with colleagues. Linda felt stupid, but she couldn't stop. She loved him, and he seemed to be finding someone else. By July, Linda was at her wit's end. She tried to be strong for Michael, but every time Jim returned from yet another meeting, her patience snapped. She saw Sarah once when she picked Michael up from Jim's office. Tall, with dark hair and a formal dress, she smiled at Jim, touching his shoulder. Linda felt a pang of jealousy, so sharp that she barely kept herself from walking over. On the evening of July 15th, after Michael had fallen asleep, Linda couldn't take it anymore. Jim was sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone. She walked in, arms crossed. We need to talk, she said, her voice firm, but inside she was shaking. About what? Jim put the phone down, but his tone was wary. About Sarah, Linda stepped closer. You're dating her, right? Jim frowned, but didn't look away. It's none of your business, he said. We agreed to be friends, Linda. I'm not interfering in your life. None of my business. Her voice broke. I live in your house, Jim. I see you smiling at her, leaving in the evenings. Do you think I'm blind? Enough. Jim stood up, his eyes narrowing. You ruined everything yourself. Now you want to control who I talk to? Linda felt tears sting her eyes, but she didn't back down. I don't control, she said, her voice shaking. I love you, Jim. I tried to be just a friend, but I can't watch you with someone else. You keep me on a chain close, but not too close. Why? Jim froze, his face a mixture of anger and pain. He walked to the window, turning away. You have no right to say that, he said quietly, after everything you've done. I know what I did, Linda almost screamed, but she held back, afraid to wake Michael. I live with it every day, but I'm here, Jim. I fought for Michael for you. And you just pushed me away. He turned, his eyes blazing. Because I can't trust you, he blurted out. You think it's easy? I loved you, Linda. And you were with someone else. I can't forget that. Linda felt her heart clench. He said loved, past tense, but she saw his pain, and that gave her courage. You still love me, she said, stepping toward him. I can see it. You're afraid, like you were after Anna. But I won't leave, Jim. I won't betray you again. He looked at her, his breathing heavy. Linda waited, feeling time stand still. She knew she was risking everything, her place in the house, her right to see Michael. But silence was worse. You don't understand, he said finally, his voice hoarse. I love you, but I can't go through this again. If you do it again, I won't be able to bear it. Linda froze. He said it. He still loved her. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. I won't do this, she said, her voice shaking. I swear, Jim, I'm not who I was. Give me a chance. Not for me. For Michael. For us. He turned away, rubbing his face. Linda waited, afraid to move. She could see him struggling with himself, his fear fighting something else, hope, maybe. I can't promise, he said finally, looking at her. I don't know if I can, but I don't want you to go. Linda nodded, her heart beating so loudly she could barely hear herself think. That's something, she said quietly. We can start slowly, without pressure. He looked at her, and there was something new in his eyes, not trust, but a desire to try. He nodded. Okay, he said, but Sarah, it's not serious. It's just, I was trying to move on with my life. Linda swallowed, feeling both relief and pain. I understand, she said. He nodded, and they fell silent. Linda wanted to hug him, but she didn't. Instead, she picked up her bottle of beer and walked into the guest room, her heart still pounding. This wasn't a victory. This wasn't love the way she wanted it to be. But it was a step, and she held on to it like a lifeline. The sun was casting a golden glow over Red Rock Canyon, and the wind carried the scent of pine and dry earth. Linda was laying out a blanket on the grass while Michael ran around nearby, throwing a frisbee with his new friend from school. Jim was busy with the picnic basket, getting out sandwiches and bottles of lemonade. This was their first family outing in months, not just Linda and Michael or Jim and Michael, but all together, like they had always done. Linda could feel her heart pounding, but she tried to focus on the little things, setting out the plates, slicing the apples, not thinking about what could go wrong. The last few weeks had been strange. Linda was living in the spare room of Jim's house, helping with Michael, cooking dinners. Jim had become softer, he joked sometimes, asked how her day was, even offered to paint the fence together. But there was still a wall between them, not as high as before, but noticeable. Their conversation in July, when Jim admitted that he loved her, but was afraid, had changed everything, but it hadn't given them answers. They were in limbo, not friends, not a couple, somewhere in between. Michael, don't throw the frisbee too close to the edge, Jim shouted, looking at his son, who ran to the edge of the canyon. I'll be careful. Michael waved his hand and returned to the game. Linda smiled at him. Michael had grown older, more confident, but he was still the same boy who had hugged her and called her mom. She looked at Jim, who was laying out the sandwiches. "He's happy," she said, nodding at Michael. "This trip is a good idea." "Yeah," Jim nodded, but his eyes were thoughtful. "It's been a while since we've gotten out like this." Linda wanted to say something else, but she stopped. She was afraid to upset the delicate balance. Instead, she took the lemonade and handed it to him. "Here," she said. "It's cold." "Thank you." Jim took the bottle, their fingers touching, and he didn't pull away. Linda felt the warmth, but quickly looked away. They ate, talking with Michael about school, football, and how he wanted a dog. Linda laughed, Jim teased his son, and for an hour it was like old times. But when Michael ran off to play, the silence between them became heavy. Linda knew she couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. Not today. "Jim," she began, looking at her hands, "we need to talk. About us." He tensed, but did not turn away. "Again?" he asked, his voice cautious. "We already talked about it, Linda." "Not completely." She looked up. "I know you're afraid. I am too. But we can't live like this forever. I love you, and I can see that you, too, feel something, but you keep me at a distance." Jim looked at the canyon, his jaw clenched. Linda waited, her heart pounding. She knew she was taking a risk, but the silence was worse. "You're right," he said finally, his voice quiet. "I'm afraid. After Anna, after you, I don't want to lose everything again. It's like standing over that abyss." He nodded toward the cliff. "One step, and that's it." Linda swallowed, feeling his words echo inside her. "I'm scared too," she said. "I'm scared you'll never forgive me, that I'll screw it up again. But I can't live pretending I don't care. I want to be with you. With Michael. A real family." Jim turned to face her, his eyes full of pain, but also something else, hope, maybe. "And if it happens again," he asked, "if I trust you and you, I won't be able to bear it, Linda. I won't do this." She took his hand, her fingers shaking. "I swear, I went through hell to be a better person. For Michael. For you. I'm not perfect, but I won't run away." He looked at their hands, then at her. Linda saw him struggling with himself, his fear fighting with his desire to believe. "I don't know if I can forget," he said. "But I don't want to lose you, not again." Linda felt tears welling up, but she held them back. "Then let's try," she said. "Not like before. Honestly, no past. Just you, me, and Michael." Jim was silent, then nodded. He squeezed her hand, and it was like a promise. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's try. But not officially. Not now. Just together." Linda smiled, her heart beating so loudly she could barely hear herself think. "Together," she repeated. "That's all I need." They sat holding hands, looking out over the canyon. The wind ruffled Linda's hair, and the sun set, painting the rocks crimson. For the first time in years, Linda felt like she could breathe. Michael ran up, holding a frisbee, and stopped, looking at them. "What's wrong?" he asked, squinting. "Are you hugging again?" Linda laughed, wiping her eyes. "What, you can't?" she asked, winking. Michael rolled his eyes, but then smiled. "I heard," he said. "Are you back together now, like before?" Jim looked at Linda, then at his son. "Something like that," he said, his voice soft, "but better." Michael beamed and rushed towards them, hugging them both. "Cool," he said. "Now we're a family again." Linda hugged him, feeling Jim put his hand on her shoulder. It wasn't a perfect ending. Their wounds still hurt, their fears were still there. But they were standing together over the abyss, and who knows, maybe they could make it. Love was worth the risk, and they finally decided to take a step. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.